In a dark and dangerous world, one human stood out. His name was Kyle. He was just an ordinary man, or so he thought, lost in a place filled with monsters, traps, and ancient ruins. The dungeon seemed endless, with walls that whispered secrets and shadows that never slept. But Kyle had no choice. He had to survive. Days turned into weeks as Kyle explored the depths of this strange world. Every step he took brought new dangers, beasts with glowing eyes, ancient puzzles, and hidden traps. Yet, through it all, Kyle noticed something strange about himself. As he faced monsters larger than life, he didn't fear them like others would. Instead, he felt a strange power stirring within him. At first, it was just a feeling, a quiet hum deep inside his chest. One day, after narrowly escaping a deadly trap set by a serpent-like creature, Kyle found himself alone in a small, hidden room. The air was heavy, and the walls seemed to pulse with energy. In the center of the room, there was an old stone pedestal. Atop it sat a small, glowing crystal. Without thinking, Kyle reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers made contact, a wave of power surged through his body. His heart raced and his vision blurred. The world around him twisted, and he could feel something ancient awakening inside him. Pain shot through his body as if something was being ripped from him, but then, just as quickly, it stopped. Kale stumbled back, breathless, his body trembling. The power was gone, but something had changed. He felt stronger. Confused and shaken, Kale left the room, trying to make sense of what had just happened. As he ventured deeper into the dungeon, he began to realize that his newfound strength wasn't just physical. He could hear things he shouldn't be able to hear. Voices, distant whispers, like echoes of forgotten memories. At night, when he closed his eyes, strange dreams haunted him. Dreams of a long-lost kingdom, of powerful beings, and of a prophecy that spoke of a human who would bring an end to the reign of the gods. But Kale had no time to dwell on the dreams. He had to keep moving. The dungeon was vast, and every corner held new dangers. However, his strength continued to grow. One night, as he fought off a pack of shadow wolves, something inside him unlocked further. With a single thought, the wolves froze in place. Kale felt his mind reach out, as if he could control their movements. The power was his now. He realized that this power wasn't just a gift. It was a force that had been hidden inside him for years, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. The dungeon had known this. That's why it had trapped him here. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a key. But to what? Days later, Kale's suspicions were confirmed when he stumbled upon an ancient tome hidden deep within the dungeon. The pages were old and worn, but the text was clear. The human who awakens the power will be the one to destroy the gods. Only he can bring balance to this world. The words sent a chill down Kale's spine. Could he really be the one to challenge the gods? He didn't feel like a hero. He was just a man who had found himself trapped in a world that wasn't his own. As Kale continued his journey, the dungeon seemed to grow more hostile. The monsters he encountered were stronger, faster, and smarter. It was as if the dungeon itself was fighting back. Something didn't want him to reach the end. But Kyle couldn't stop now. The power inside him burned brighter every day, pushing him forward. One night, as he was resting near a dark lake, Kale was awoken by a voice. It was soft, almost a whisper, but it echoed in his mind. You cannot escape the truth, human. Kale's heart pounded in his chest. He looked around, but there was no one there. Yet, the voice continued. You were not meant to find this power. It will destroy you, just as it has destroyed others before you. Kyle stood up, sweat beading on his forehead. Was it the dungeon speaking to him? Or was it something else? The voice sounded almost familiar, but he couldn't place it. The next day, Kale ventured deeper into the dungeon, the voice still echoing in his mind. But something else had changed. He could feel eyes watching him from the shadows. The deeper he went, the more he felt as if he was being hunted. That evening, Kale found a hidden chamber deep within the dungeon. There, standing before him, was a figure cloaked in darkness. The figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face, his own. "Who are you?" Kale demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The figure smiled. I am what you will become. The power you seek will consume you, and you will join us. Kyle took a step back. No, I won't let it happen. The figure laughed, a cold, chilling sound that echoed in the chamber. It's already too late. Kyle's heart raced as the figure moved closer, its dark eyes burning with an unsettling knowledge. The gods are not the real enemies, the figure whispered. The real danger is what lies within you. And it's already waking. Kale's hand tightened around his weapon. He was no longer just a man trapped in a dungeon. He was something more. And now, he had no choice but to face the truth. The power that could save him could also destroy him. The real test had just begun. In the heart of a dark and dangerous world, there was a legend about an artifact known as the Heartstone. Said to hold unimaginable power, it was rumored that whoever found it would rule the world. Many had tried, but none had returned. A young man named Jace had heard the stories all his life. But for him, they were just that, stories. Until the day everything changed. Jace had always been an outsider. He was from a small village on the edge of the kingdom, a place where most people had never heard of the Heartstone. But Jace wasn't like the others. He had always been curious, always seeking answers to questions that no one else seemed to ask. And when he overheard a group of travelers talking about the Heartstone in a nearby tavern, something inside him clicked. This was no longer just a story. It was real. Determined to find it, Jace set out on a journey that would take him far from the safety of his village. The road was treacherous, filled with beasts and bandits. But the thought of the Heartstone kept him going, pushing him forward with each step. He knew the risks, but he also knew that this was the opportunity of a lifetime. For days, Jace traveled through dense forests and across barren deserts, guided only by a cryptic map he had stolen from the travelers. The map was old, its edges worn, and its symbols were difficult to read. But Jace wasn't one to give up easily. With every step, he grew more determined. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jace reached the entrance to an ancient temple hidden deep in the mountains. The temple was carved into the side of a cliff, its entrance guarded by massive stone statues of forgotten gods. A chill ran down Jace's spine as he stepped closer. This was it. The Heartstone was inside. But as Jace entered the temple, he realized something was wrong. The air was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to whisper, as if they were alive. The deeper he went, the colder it became. And the deeper Jace went, the more he felt like he was being watched. The temple was vast, its halls stretching on for miles. Strange markings covered the walls, and Jace had to be careful not to trigger any traps. Every corner held a new mystery. And as he moved further into the heart of the temple, he felt a growing sense of unease. Something was waiting for him. Something ancient. At last, Jace reached a large chamber. In the center, resting on a stone pedestal, was the Heartstone. It glowed with an eerie light, its surface smooth and flawless. Jace felt a strange pull toward it, as if it was calling to him. But as he stepped forward, a voice echoed through the chamber. Leave now, and you may still live. Jace froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The voice wasn't human. It sounded ancient, filled with power. But where was it coming from? He glanced around but saw no one. You do not understand the power you seek, the voice continued. The Heartstone is not a gift. It is a curse. Jace stood still, uncertain. The Heartstone was within his reach, but he had been warned. Should he take it? Or should he turn back? Why should I listen to you? Jace asked aloud. I've come this far. I'm not leaving without it. The voice laughed, a hollow sound that seemed to echo off the walls. You think you're the first to try? Many have come before you, and they all thought the same. None of them survived. Despite the voice's warning, Jace's hand moved toward the Heartstone. The moment his fingers touched its surface, a surge of energy shot through his body. His vision blurred, and he felt his strength drain away. The room seemed to spin as the power of the Heartstone took hold of him. But it wasn't the power he had expected. It was dark, chaotic, Dangerous. Jace stumbled back, gasping for air. The voice continued to speak, but it was no longer just a voice. It was a presence, wrapping itself around his mind, filling him with images of destruction and chaos. "Now you understand," the voice said, its tone triumphant. "The Heartstone does not grant power. It takes it. It consumes those who are foolish enough to seek it." Jace's head spun as the power of the Heartstone clawed at his mind. He could feel it trying to control him, to twist his thoughts. But something inside him fought back. He had come too far to let the Heartstone destroy him. With all his strength, Jace reached out and grabbed the Heartstone, ignoring the pain that shot through him. He focused all his will on resisting the darkness, using the fire of his own spirit to fight back against the curse. Slowly, the power began to recede. The room grew quiet, and the presence in his mind faded. Jace stood there, breathless and shaking, holding the Heartstone in his hands. It was not what he had expected. It was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. But he had survived. And he had learned the truth. The Heartstone was not meant to be controlled. It was meant to be kept hidden. Jace looked around the dark temple, feeling the weight of his decision. The Heartstone had chosen him, but at what cost? He could feel its power still pulsing in his hands, tempting him. He could use it to rule the world, to gain power beyond his wildest dreams. But at what price? With a heavy heart, Jace turned and left the chamber, the Heartstone still glowing in his grasp. He had come for power, but he had found something much darker instead. This version of the story is engaging and suspenseful, with simple language and a slow buildup of tension. It keeps the mystery alive, creating a sense of unease as Jace faces the Heartstone's true power. Let me know what you think. Lucas had always felt out of place. Ever since he could remember, he had lived in the small, quiet town of Ashwood, where everyone knew everyone else, and nothing ever seemed to change. But Lucas had no memories before the age of 5. His parents had found him in the woods, cold and alone, with no explanation for who he was or where he came from. They had raised him as their own, but the mystery of his past haunted him, making him feel different from everyone else. As he grew older, the questions only grew stronger. Who was he really? Why couldn't he remember anything from before he was 5? Why did he feel like he was meant for something more than the quiet life of Ashwood? One stormy night, everything changed. Lucas was walking home from the town's library when he noticed something strange. A figure stood by the edge of the woods, watching him. It was a man, tall and cloaked in dark clothing, his face hidden in shadow. Before Lucas could react, the man spoke in a voice that sent a chill down his spine. "You're looking for answers, aren't you, Lucas?" Lucas froze. How did this man know his name? He had never seen him before. "Who are you?" Lucas demanded, his heart pounding in his chest. The man stepped closer, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "I know who you are," he said, his voice low and steady. "I know what you've been searching for all these years." Lucas felt a mix of fear and curiosity. "What do you mean? Who are you?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled a small, weathered book from his cloak and handed it to Lucas. The cover was faded, but Lucas could make out the words, "The Lost Ones." "This book will tell you everything you need to know," the man said. "Your past is not what you think it is." Lucas stared at the book, his hands trembling. Could this stranger really know the truth about him? The man turned and began to walk away, his voice fading into the wind. "Find the answers before it's too late." Confused but desperate for answers, Lucas rushed home. He locked himself in his room and opened the book. The pages were filled with strange symbols and stories of ancient secrets, but one name kept appearing: the Shadow Clan. The Shadow Clan was a group of people believed to have disappeared centuries ago, but the book claimed they had a hidden legacy. Lucas's name was mentioned repeatedly, though in strange ways, as though it was always connected to something much greater than he could understand. The more Lucas read, the more his heart raced. The Shadow Clan was said to have the power to control the very fabric of reality, to shape the future. It was believed that one of their descendants had the potential to awaken this power, to change the world. But the clan had been hunted down and destroyed long ago, or so everyone thought. Lucas flipped through the pages until he found something that stopped him cold: a family tree. His eyes widened as he saw the name at the top, Lucas Rinn. It was his name, but the dates beside it were wrong. His birth year was marked as something far older than he had ever known. Suddenly, everything clicked. He wasn't just an ordinary person from Ashwood. He was connected to something far bigger, something ancient. He was a descendant of the Shadow Clan. His mind raced. How had he ended up in Ashwood? Why couldn't he remember anything from before he was 5? What had happened to his family? He had to find out the truth. The next day, Lucas set out for the only place that might hold the answers: the abandoned mansion at the edge of town. The mansion had been empty for as long as anyone could remember, but Lucas had always felt drawn to it, as if it was calling to him. The book had mentioned a hidden door in the mansion, a door that led to a secret chamber beneath the house. It was said to hold the final key to unlocking the truth. As he approached the mansion, Lucas felt a sense of unease. The wind howled through the broken windows, and the once grand structure looked like it had been forgotten by time itself. He found the door just as the book had described: a hidden panel in the wall that slid open with a faint creak. Descending into the darkness, Lucas's heart raced. The chamber was cold, the air thick with dust. As he moved deeper into the room, his eyes caught sight of something glowing faintly in the corner. It was a stone pedestal, and on top of it lay a small, ornate box. He could feel its power even before he touched it. When he opened the box, inside was a pendant, a black stone with strange, glowing symbols etched into it. The moment he touched it, a surge of energy shot through him. Visions flooded his mind: images of a long-lost city, of people with powers beyond imagination, and of a great betrayal that had destroyed everything. He saw his own face among the people of the Shadow Clan, a leader of sorts, someone who'd been forced into hiding to protect the clan's secrets. The truth was clear now. He wasn't just a lost child from the woods. He was the last living member of the Shadow Clan, the one destined to awaken the power that could change the world. But there were others who sought this power, and they would stop at nothing to find him. Lucas's journey had only just begun. The truth about his past had changed everything, and now he had to decide what to do with the power that had been hidden from him for so long. But one thing was certain: the past had come to find him, and it would never let him go. The ancient temple stood in ruins, half buried under centuries of sand and dust. No one had set foot inside for generations. It was a place whispered about in old legends, a place that held a dark secret, a secret that would soon awaken. Mara had always heard stories about the forgotten gods. As a child, she had been told that they were powerful beings who had once ruled the world, controlling everything from the sun to the storms. But when the Great War had come, they had vanished, leaving no trace behind. Only a few ancient texts remained, warning of their return, but no one believed those stories anymore. That was until the day Mara found the temple. It was an accident at first. She had been exploring the desert, seeking anything other than the dull life in her small village. She stumbled across the ruins and, curious, ventured inside. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of forgotten history. The stone walls seemed to hum with an energy that made her skin tingle. As Mara walked deeper into the temple, she discovered something that chilled her to the bone: a series of ancient murals depicting battles between gods. The murals were old and faded, but one thing was clear: the gods were not just gods of the elements or the skies. They were gods of destruction. They fought for power, and they had been defeated. Mara's heart pounded as she traced the image of a god, his hand raised in the air, a weapon of lightning crackling in his grasp. Beside him, a smaller figure was kneeling, its form twisted and broken. But what caught Mara's attention was a symbol at the base of the mural, a symbol she recognized from the old stories. The symbol of the forgotten gods. Suddenly, the temple shook, as if answering the call of the past. The ground rumbled beneath her feet, and dust filled the air. A deep voice, like thunder, echoed through the stone halls. "You have awakened us." Mara froze. The voice seemed to come from all directions, surrounding her, filling her mind. She felt a cold presence enter her thoughts, and for a moment, she could see the world as if through the eyes of a god. She could feel the power, the anger, and the hunger for revenge that had been locked away for centuries. In an instant, Mara knew the truth. The forgotten gods had not died. They'd been sealed away, hidden from the world by those who feared them. And now they were waking. The voice spoke again, this time clearer, sharper. The time has come for us to reclaim what is ours. The battle will begin anew. Before she could react, the temple doors slammed shut, trapping her inside. The walls began to crack and shift, as if something enormous was stirring beneath the stone. Mara's heart raced. She needed to leave, but the temple wouldn't let her go. The gods had already claimed her, and she was now a part of their plan. With no other choice, Mara ran. She sprinted through the winding halls, her breath short, her mind racing. She had to find a way out. But the deeper she went, the more the temple seemed to change. The walls pulsed with a dark energy, and the murals on the walls began to move, the god's eyes following her every step. Then, as she rounded a corner, she saw him. The god of lightning. He stood at the end of the hall, his form towering over her. His eyes were filled with fury, his body crackling with energy. He raised his hand, and Mara felt a blast of wind rush past her, knocking her to the ground. The god spoke, his voice like a storm. "You have trespassed in our domain. You will pay the price." Mara scrambled to her feet, but the god's power was too great. The air was thick with electricity, and the ground trembled beneath her. She could feel the gods growing stronger with every passing second. There was no way to stop them. But then, she remembered something from the old stories. A secret. The forgotten gods could be defeated, but only if their power was contained. There was a relic, hidden deep within the temple, that could seal them away once more. But it would be dangerous. And Mara wasn't sure she had the strength to find it in time. With a surge of desperation, she turned and ran again, this time heading for the deepest part of the temple. She could hear the god of lightning chasing her, his footsteps shaking the ground, his power crackling in the air. The temple was collapsing around her, but she didn't stop. Finally, in the heart of the temple, Mara found the relic. It was a small, silver orb, glowing with a soft blue light. The orb seemed to pulse with energy, as if it was alive. Mara reached out, her fingers trembling. She had no time to waste. But just as her hand touched the orb, the god of lightning appeared before her, his eyes burning with fury. "You cannot stop us!" he roared. Mara closed her eyes and whispered the words from the old stories, the words that had been passed down through the generations. As she spoke, the orb began to glow brighter, the power of the forgotten gods resisting her, fighting back. But Mara didn't give up. She focused all her energy on the orb, pushing against the god's power with everything she had. And then, with a blinding flash of light, the temple fell silent, the shaking stopped, and the dark presence that had filled the air vanished. Mara stood alone in the ruins, the relic still glowing softly in her hands. The battle was over, but the truth had been revealed. The forgotten gods had not been defeated, they had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. And they would return again. But for now, Mara had won. Claire had always loved antiques. The worn old objects in her grandmother's shop seemed to hold a history, stories untold. But nothing intrigued her more than the mirror that sat in the back of the store. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. Its frame was ornate, carved with strange symbols, and its glass had a dark, almost smoky quality to it. The mirror was different, heavy, almost too heavy for its size, and Claire couldn't help but feel drawn to it. "Grandma, where did this mirror come from?" Claire asked one day as she cleaned around it. Her grandmother, a quiet woman with an unsettling calm, didn't look up from her work. "It's been with our family for generations." "Just don't stare into it too long," she warned, her voice distant. Clara didn't think much of the warning. After all, it was just a mirror. But something about it made her uneasy. Every time she passed it, she felt a pull, a strange desire to look into it. Yet, whenever she did, she found herself staring into its depths for far too long, as if the mirror was holding her in place. One evening, as the sun set and the shop grew darker, Clara stood in front of the mirror again. Her reflection stared back at her, but something was off. The image seemed wrong. Her eyes were too dark, her face too pale. She blinked, but the reflection didn't change. Clara stepped back, shivering. "It's just the lighting," she whispered to herself. But the feeling of unease lingered. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of her reflection kept haunting her thoughts, those dark eyes, the pale face. It was as if the mirror had shown her something that didn't belong to her. She had to know what was happening. She needed to understand. The next morning, Clara decided to take a closer look at the mirror. She pulled it away from the wall, surprised at how heavy it was, and set it on the table. As she examined the back, she noticed a hidden latch. Intrigued, she pressed it, and the back of the mirror swung open, revealing a small compartment. Inside, Clara found an old, worn piece of paper. The edges were yellow and fragile, and the ink had faded over time, but the words were still legible. To see the truth, you must face what lies beyond the glass. Beware what you find. Her heart pounded as she read the words. What did they mean? Clara's mind raced. She couldn't resist. She had to know. With trembling hands, she turned the mirror around and stared into its dark surface again. At first, everything seemed normal. Her reflection stared back at her. But then, slowly, something changed. Her reflection smiled. Clara froze, her blood running cold. She didn't smile, but her reflection did. It grinned at her, a wide, unnatural grin. Clara gasped, stepping back, but her reflection didn't move. It stayed frozen, its smile wide and eerie. You see it now, don't you? A voice echoed from the mirror. It wasn't her voice, but it sounded like her, twisted and wrong. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, to get away, but her feet were rooted to the floor. She could feel something pulling at her, dragging her closer to the glass. The voice came again, louder this time. You are mine. Before Clara could react, the mirror's surface rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. And then, it wasn't just a reflection anymore. The dark figure in the mirror began to move, its form stretching and shifting, until it stepped out of the glass and into the room. Clara stumbled backward, her heart racing. The figure was tall and shadowy, its features distorted, like a nightmare-given form. It was her, yet it wasn't. Its eyes were black as coal, empty and hollow, staring at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Who? What are you? Clara whispered, her voice shaking with fear. I am the one who's been waiting, the figure replied, its voice a low, rasping echo. I am what lies beneath your skin, what you keep hidden. I am your darkness. Clara couldn't breathe. Her reflection, her own dark side, had come to life. She realized with horror that this thing, this shadow, had been watching her all her life. It had been waiting for the moment when it could finally break free. The figure raised its hand, and Clara felt a cold, crushing force push against her chest. You cannot escape me, it said, its voice growing louder, more commanding. You are me, and I am you. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes as she struggled to break free from its hold. She wanted to run, but the figure's power was too strong. It was pulling her toward the mirror, toward the dark abyss within it. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the shop. Clara's grandmother appeared in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. Clara, don't look into the mirror. But it was too late. The figure lunged at Clara, its hands reaching out, and before she could scream, she was dragged into the mirror. Her grandmother ran to her, but there was nothing she could do. The glass rippled again, and Clara's form disappeared. The shop fell silent, the mirror standing still. And in the dark reflection, only the shadow remained, grinning.